Silence Speaks Volumes. How the Black Chef Protected Her Billionaire Boss from Her Husband's Deception. What would you do if the life of the person you worked for was in jeopardy? Someone who had shown you nothing but kindness, yet was blind to the deceit happening under her own roof. In the world of power, wealth, and hidden truths, one woman's loyalty will be tested in ways she never imagined. When a betrayal, as toxic as it is silent, happens right under her nose, she must decide whether to reveal it or protect the person who's been her lifeline. But in doing so, will her own voice be lost forever? Watch as silence speaks volumes in this shocking tale of deception, loyalty, and hidden prejudice. In the grand estate of a billionaire business mogul, Natalie, a black woman from humble beginnings, worked tirelessly as the head chef. Having grown up in a neighborhood where dreams felt out of reach, she'd found solace in her culinary talents. When she was offered a job at one of the wealthiest homes in the country, she saw it as her chance to make something of herself. Her boss, Lisa, was an elegant woman, well known in both business and social circles for her beauty, intellect, and charm. Lisa's wealth hadn't always been easy to come by, but through hard work, she had risen to the top of her industry. Natalie had always admired her for not letting her success change who she was. Although their relationship was professional, it had evolved into something more profound, an unexpected yet powerful friendship. Natalie, while keeping her distance in many ways, felt the weight of her position. She often overheard the conversations that most people would have preferred to keep behind closed doors. Lisa's husband, Edward, a suave, successful man, appeared outwardly charming. But over time, Natalie began to sense a growing unease. Whenever she was near him, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right, especially when Edward would ask her about her own background or make remarks about her. Natalie often brushed these comments off, telling herself he was just awkward or ignorant. After all, he was Lisa's husband, the man who had built the life she now led. However, as time passed, she would learn that not everything is as it seems. One evening, Natalie was cleaning the kitchen when she noticed something out of place. Edward's phone had been left behind on the counter, the screen glowing in the dim light. At first, she hesitated. It wasn't her place to invade anyone's privacy, especially her boss's husband. But the buzzing sound, followed by a ping, made her pause. Curiosity took over. She picked up the phone and unlocked it. The first thing that caught her eye was a series of text messages between Edward and a woman, the tone of the exchanges suggestive and intimate. But it wasn't the affair that made Natalie's heart race. It was the content of the messages. The woman was discussing plans to sabotage Lisa's business. They were discussing how Lisa's reputation could be destroyed, manipulating financial records, and framing her for illegal activities she was unaware of. It was cold, calculated. Edward was not only betraying his wife, but was actively trying to destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. Natalie's hands trembled as she scrolled through the messages. She felt a deep sense of guilt for having seen something so personal, but also an overwhelming need to protect Lisa. It wasn't just the affair, it was a threat to everything Lisa stood for. How could she let her walk into that trap? But what could she do? If she told Lisa, how could she prove the betrayal without making it seem like an unadorned accusation from the help? And how could she expose her boss's husband without risking her job, her career, and the trust Lisa had in her? She couldn't help but wonder. Was she a silent accomplice in this? Or was she about to take a step into the unknown, knowing full well that speaking up might cost her everything? Her thoughts were interrupted as Edward's car pulled into the driveway. He was back. The weight of the moment felt suffocating. Natalie had to make a choice. Did she reveal the truth and risk being labeled as a troublemaker? Or did she stay silent, knowing the damage it would cause? It was a question of loyalty, but also a question of race. How would Lisa, a wealthy white woman, respond to the betrayal of her husband and the revelation of the prejudices that were buried in their world? Natalie didn't know if she could carry the truth alone any longer. The following day, everything changed. Natalie was in the kitchen when Lisa came rushing in, her face pale and eyes wide with fear. "Natalie, I think there's something wrong," Lisa whispered, trembling as she looked around nervously. "Edward. He's acting strange. He's been distant, and I found some of the financial documents missing. There's something I'm not seeing, and I need your help." Without saying a word, Natalie handed her the phone. Lisa's gaze immediately dropped to the screen, and as she read the messages, her face turned from shock to disbelief to a deep, heart-wrenching sorrow. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she slowly looked up at Natalie, the woman who had just saved her life, emotionally and financially. "I didn't see it," Lisa whispered. "I didn't see him for who he truly was." For a moment, the two women stood in silence. Lisa, the woman with everything, had been blinded by her love and trust in Edward. Natalie, the woman who had everything to lose, had seen it all from the beginning. It was a moment of raw vulnerability, a moment where the power dynamics shifted. The privileged and the underprivileged stood side by side, their worlds intertwined in a way neither could have predicted. But as Lisa looked at Natalie, something changed. She wasn't angry. She wasn't even upset. There was an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Natalie had not only exposed the truth, but had done so in a way that protected Lisa from the inevitable heartbreak of finding out in the most public way possible. In that moment, Lisa realized the depth of the betrayal. Still, she also learned something even more profound. She had been blind to the things happening right under her nose. In the days that followed, Lisa took swift action, but not before confronting Edward. She filed for divorce, secured the business from further sabotage, and began the long process of healing. But for Natalie, the aftermath was a far more complicated affair. She had saved her boss's life and career, but she had also exposed herself to the racial dynamics at play in a world where a black woman's voice was often overlooked. As Natalie walked out of the mansion for the last time, her heart was heavy. She had done what was right, but in doing so, she had forever altered her relationship with Lisa. She would never forget the way Lisa looked at her when the truth came out, no longer just an employee, but someone who had fought for her. The story wasn't just about a woman standing up for another. It was about recognizing the more profound, systemic injustices that ran through every level of power and privilege. It was about how silence, whether forced or chosen, can sometimes protect us, but it can also silence the truth when we need it most. As Natalie stepped into the sunlight, the weight of her decisions behind her, she realized that speaking out was never easy, but it was necessary. How many more voices were silenced by the power structures of the world? And how many would continue to be until we recognize the stories that often go untold? What would you do in Natalie's position? Would you choose silence, or would you speak out, knowing that your voice could be the one that makes the difference?